Say hi to my cars.
Hello, sweet cars.
Wow.
Wow, that looks freaking amazing.
What? The STI?
Yeah.
Street Fighter, my guy.
Hey, I've been looking for my gym fob.
What is going on, my friends? Welcome back to the channel. Let me set the camera down real quick. I'm sure some of you guys are a little bit curious as to what's been going on in my life in the last couple weeks because I haven't really been uploading. Let me explain why. We're back at the shop, by the way. Feels good to be home and get back to work. All right, so real quick, reason I have not been uploading a lot is because Bobby and I were down in Mexico. It was supposed to be a 7-day trip. Second day there, I ended up getting, what was it called? Tapeworm? Worms in my stomach from some shitty food I ate or some shitty water I potentially drank. I was sick. I did not leave the bed for like 4 days. Ended up going into the hospital. They gave me a bunch of medication. Yeah, it was very, very miserable. Very, very miserable. If you could avoid getting worms, I would highly, highly recommend it. We ended up having to extend the trip a few days just so I could even fly back. So today's Tuesday. I started feeling pretty good like Sunday. Yesterday was solid. Today's Tuesday. I'm good to go. I'm ready to get back to work. There's still a ton of medication I have to take to like completely get the worms out of my stomach, out of my system, because you can actually die from tapeworm, which is pretty insane. So I'm glad I went into the hospital. I'm not a big fan of like, I never go to the hospital for anything, especially like when I just get sick. And I'm glad I did because you can actually die from that shit, and that would not be good if I died, right? Okay, so we're back at the shop, ready to get back to work on all the cars. So I guess where we left off on the hatch, there was a lot of things that I was rushing, trying to get the car fired up. I'm out of breath. Before we left for Mexico. So I'm gonna be redoing a lot of those little things. I'm still shooting for a first start, either today or tomorrow. It's easily obtainable. Holy shit. Why am I so out of breath? What's wrong with me? There's a few packages that came in that we needed to kind of button some things up. So let's go ahead and open up those packages real quick. So from Grimspeed, we got a exhaust manifold crossover pipe. Came with the hardware, came with the gaskets, and then we also picked up a MAF block off plate because the STI is going to go on speed density. So we're not going to be running, we won't be running a MAF later on down the road, but for now we're going to run the MAF. But later on, we'll install that when we go get that intake air temp sensor installed. And then from Grimspeed, these are the new spacers that we needed. The ones that we have are 20 mil, and they're a bit too large for the DW 1200s that we have in there. So we picked up their 11 mil spacers. So big shout outs to both of these companies for getting these parts over to me while I was gone. And now we can go ahead and get them installed. Both of these companies linked down in the description box below. Let's go ahead and get the exhaust manifold crossover pipe installed. Let me show you guys real quick why we have to install it. And this may have held up, but I think over time it would have started cracking. So when I cut off the heat shields on the crossover pipe, I ended up cutting through and I welded it. And then I realized that Grimspeed made a crossover pipe. So that'll be a much better long-term option. The Grimsby is actually quite a bit thicker overall, or like a, I guess, pipe size. I'm curious to see if there's any sort of power gains made with the Grimsby versus the OEM. I'm gonna look it up on their website. I'm sure they've done a ton of testing. And as you can see, we did get the one that comes already ceramic coated. Pretty sure it's the same exact ceramic coat as the coating that we use. The Cerakote C76 or 7300. Looks really, really nice. Thick flanges, stock, Grimsby. All right, just spent the last hour buttoning up a few things. We got those spacers in for the fuel rails. I found that little plug that goes right there. That was sitting in the engine bay. We lost that before we left, so I found it, got that guy installed. There's a clamp on the PCV I needed to get on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and run a vacuum line. So our regulator needs a vacuum line right there. So when we are building boost, fuel pressure will raise along with boost. Nipple on the intake manifold there. Gonna run it underneath while we have everything apart and right up to the back of that. All the other nipples on the manifold we do not need, so I'll go ahead and cap those off for now. I do want to change the color of the manifold. I don't think it looks good in this red, so I'll probably do a wrinkle black later on down the road when we throw in the built 2.5. I ordered all this hose a while back. One of the best investments I've ever made, this vacuum hose. Went ahead, got our vacuum lines ran that we had to run. This guy is gonna go to the BOV whenever we get it installed. How to put that coolant or the turbo expansion or the turbo coolant tank back on for now. That's only temporary. I think they're ugly. We're gonna delete that later on down the road. Next up is boost control. We should have a Grimsby EBCS laying around here somewhere, so let's try to find it. Being that we're trying to keep this engine bay somewhat clean, I'm not gonna mount this in the original location. I'm gonna mount it somewhere off to the side. Probably exactly where we mounted Bobby's, honestly, which is right up in this area here. This is gonna allow for much better boost control. So one port goes to our wastegate, one port goes to the turbo compressor housing, that nipple right there. Third port can either run back to the intake or the turbo inlet or just leave it vent to atmosphere. I'm 99% sure. So I'm gonna look it up real quick, figure out which port runs where, and I think I'm gonna mount it right on that little tab right there. All right, port 1 goes back to the intake, port 2 goes to the wastegate, port 3 goes to the compressor housing. You can't deny that's a clean setup. Beautiful. Next up is what, some fluids and a start and a first ever cold start for the boys. I think we're about that stage. All right, getting this thing fully topped off on all the fluids. Went ahead, connected the battery with the ignition on, and we sprung a little fuel leak from a injector. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that fixed. Then we should be able to turn this thing over, get some oil pressure built up, and give her a nice little fire. So we got this thing fully topped off on fluids. We did have a little bit of a coolant leak, which I believe was coming from this hose here. So I got that fixed. All should be good. I'm gonna disconnect the crank position sensor so it doesn't fire up, and we can go get this thing turned over and build some oil pressure and then start it up. There's no front O2, so it's literally just dumping right out.
Oh, that's so loud.
Well, the car runs, but we don't have a front O2 sensor in it, so it's extremely, extremely loud out of that hole. Oh, it's still just a little bit rich with the 1200s in there. Holy shit! You want to open that door a little bit? I might die. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw a random O2 sensor in it. When we go to tune this car, we're not gonna run any O2s anyway, just like we did on Bob's car. So it doesn't really matter, but for now, I just want to get that hole plugged. Holy shit, that is smoky. It actually runs all right with the 1200s.
Yeah, does it even have a base map or anything? No.
There's no base map at all. I know, I'm stoked. Hell yeah, it runs. All right, we got to plug in the exhaust manifold where we had a fatty leak. So I'm gonna go ahead and fire it up again. We made sure the oil's topped off. We gotta add in about half quart there, so we're good. Added in a little bit more coolant into the turbo reservoir. So let's go ahead and get this thing fired up, and I'm gonna bleed the power steering system right now. If I can get this cap off. So let's fill up the reservoir, and all we're gonna do is turn the wheel left to right until air stops coming out of the reservoir. All right, so the power steering is bled. All the fluids on the whole entire car are good, except for we need to bleed the brakes still. which I don't know if I'm gonna do that today. I don't plan on driving the car today. It's dark out and it's 20 something degrees and I don't have a windshield. So it'd be fairly miserably cold, but I'm excited to get this thing fired up and finally listen to it run again. She's up to full operating temperature right now. Didn't overheat at all. We haven't blown the head gaskets yet somehow, which is cool. What do we need to do now? I think the rest of the day is probably just gonna be spent kind of reassembling the car. I wanna get all the wide body panels back on and just kind of start buttoning stuff up on the build. So when we do have time to run in and get the glass installed, we can actually go out and drive and enjoy the car. Front end of this thing looks a billion times better with the Grimspeed front mount up in there. That 4-inch core is a little bit too thick for this bumper, so we're gonna have to do a little bit of trimming just right up in here. We're just gonna have to angle that out a little bit, so not a big deal. Other than that, it should clear fine. And yeah, like I said, it looks 1,000 times better. Fairly aggressive. I can dig it. So we got it to clear the intercooler core. We had to trim off about 1 inch around that whole entire opening. And now we are having issues with it hitting the intercooler piping. So just a little bit of trimming right up in here. I'm not gonna just cut for the intercooler piping. I don't think that would look good. So I'm gonna take this edge and I'm gonna bring the whole edge out, maybe 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch on each side, and hopefully then it'll actually fit onto the car with this fatty intercooler kit. So this thing's pretty much all finished up, like mechanically wise. Of course, we still have to do the intake air temp sensor, slap a little tune on it. We're gonna have beta tune this car, and I don't think I'm gonna make any crazy sort of power right now. It's not worth it with a 2-liter, but I do want to finish up some other projects that we already started, which obviously, like the bodywork of the car still needs some love. These front wide body panels, we need to get some studs epoxied on the backside. And that 3M epoxy takes about 24 hours to cure. So I want to get that done tonight before I leave for the night. What's up guys, it's the next morning. Last night I had to leave the shop. I ended up feeling really sick after taking some stupid medication for the parasites that I have to take for 2 more weeks. So bear with me, I might get sick here and there. Before I end out the video, new Boston drop coming up this Sunday, what would that be, the 27th? The 28th, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You guys were trying to get stuff last launch and you missed out, here's your opportunity. November 28th, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Super excited to finally make some solid progress on the STI and get this thing fired up. Peace out, my friends. I'll see you guys tomorrow.